You are listening to Talking Star Wars.
Hello, Star Wars fans. My name is Alex,
And I'm Connor,
and today we're going to talk about Star Wars.
as we normally do. And this isn't exactly a continuation of past series because we've taken a look at some alien species in Star Wars before, but these have been the more um, speaking, conscious, sentient creatures, much like humans. But we're going kind of on a different angle today. So, Alex, what episode are we at?
Yeah, so everyone, welcome to episode 80, Giant Space Monsters.
So yes. And who doesn't love a good giant space monster? I think that with Star Wars, it is again a kind of a melting pot of so many different aspects of fiction, of fantasy, of science fiction. And what a better inclusion than your kaiju, your unimaginable beast.
Yep, we have talked in a previous episode about creatures in Star Wars. Way back in episode 19, we talked about the land creatures seen in Star Wars and touched on the existence of space monsters. But today we wanted to specifically look at some of the largest and most significant monsters that literally live in space in the Star Wars universe. And those are the Purgill, which are the space whales that we see in Rebels and Ahsoka. The exogorth, better known as the giant worm that almost devours the Millennium Falcon in Empire Strikes Back. And the suma-verminoth, which is the enormous giant space kaiju that exists in the Acadiz maelstrom around Kessel that almost eats the Millennium Falcon in Solo, a Star Wars story. The Millennium Falcon apparently just attracts giant space creatures.
It's kind of like a hunk of junk. It's almost like a dog who found a fresh animal carcass and just wants to roll around in it.
Yeah,
Um,
apparently the Millennium Falcon's a delicacy for space kaiju.
mhm.
Right. So of our three creatures we want to explore today and discuss their depiction and traits. Which one most interests you, Connor? Where should we start?
Well, I think for me, the first one I can remember seeing as a youth was that of the exogorth, where it's a fantastic scene. You've seen Empire, I've seen Empire, our fans have, but to remind you, the Millennium Falcon is stuck seemingly in this cave on an asteroid, on the run from the Empire, and they start to discover life within this cave, and it's a group of Minocs, these flying suction cup mouthed creatures. And then Han Solo picks up that, oh, they are, in no cave. They are within the belly of the exogorth.
Yeah, and at first, for your hard sci-fi fans, it's like, how do they have like atmospheric pressure and air for the Minox to live and such inside in space? Well, one, they're in the body of a giant creature, and this inspired the creation of rather detailed lore about the very unique and strange life cycle of an exogorth. So, exogorths have a lifespan measured in billions of years. They can remember the life and death of stars, and they drift between stars in the galaxy in pursuit of life and meaning. So their primary ability, other than living a ridiculously long period of time, is exogorths have the ability to segment the interior of their bodies to contain life kind of as their own interior menagerie. So it is considered a status symbol for an exogorth to have colonies of living creatures that can have a stable biome for countless generations housed entirely within the exogorth.
Well, my instant gut response to that is gross. So what kind of colonies do we find living in exogorth? We know we have the Minocs, but in the expanded materials, what else do we find?
So yeah, we have a variety of like exotic and extinct creatures from across that the primary source for exogorth lore is we have a story in um, from a certain point of view, the Empire Strikes Back edition, that is from the perspective of the exogorth that swallows the Millennium Falcon. And it is considered to be a low status, lonely exogorth because it only has Minox inside of it.
Mhm.
And it's so proud of them, and the exogorths are like, "You are merely a child. You don't have any rare, extinct life. Minox are, you live everywhere. How dare you be proud of just having Minox inside you?"
Mhm.
And which is why it is aggressively trying to capture some more intelligent life and keep it inside itself.
Gotcha. So it's the Minox, or I'm sorry, the Exegol is almost like an
Yeah,
organic
the
version
yeah,
of Brainiac, just containing these alien species for uh, kind of to collect and not so much study as you would in Brainiac's case, but for the status nonetheless.
yeah. The other depiction we see of an exogorth that contains a variety of exotic life is in the Legends of Luke Skywalker, both the novel and then the manga adaptation, which depicts this visually, which has is from the perspective of a scientist who is researching flora and fauna, and then uh, while journeying with Luke Skywalker, is swallowed by an exogorth. So Luke and the scientist have to survive inside the exogorth, going deeper and deeper inside until eventually we find some ancient Force users that were swallowed by the exogorth millennia ago that predate the Jedi. They are like fate spinners and have a variety of things. Um, they've placed themselves in stasis, and so Luke is able to commune with them, and they let loose their hold on life to help them escape the exogorth.
Interesting. So yeah, I would definitely not mind seeing these creatures make another appearance within Star Wars lore, and of course, a background creature has such a backstory, much like the Sarlacc within the Sarlacc pits and the
Yeah,
history
e-
that's undergone.
everything in Star Wars needs an intricate backstory, and the exogorth are no exception. It's like it can't just be a giant space worm; it has to be a giant space worm with a backstory.
Mhm.
Uh, but that said, I like some might view it as like a cynical take on like how do we explain why there was air inside this space worm. But I think it's always a cool part of Star Wars to like fill in the little gaps that are left behind and come up with reasons why things happen.
Oh,
And
sure.
I find the idea of intelligent, near immortal space worms drifting through space to be interesting. I mean, and this is part of the appeal of the giant space creature in that it's transgressive almost because you don't expect there to be life in space. The vacuum of space is actively hostile to life. You know, humans are staying in starships so that they can breathe and have air and oxygen. And then just to see bare, fleshy life out there in the vacuum of space, it has an edge of terror to it. Like, how is this thing alive out here?
Mhm. Something that is so far beyond human survival that just puts us in awe.
Yeah.
So,
And I think in our sliding scale of benevolence versus dangerous, we're going to put the Exogorth in the middle between our
mhm.
three giant space creatures today. It does try to eat the Millennium Falcon. However, it's not that fast, and it's mostly either seems territorial, and now we know it's just trying to trap life inside of it to as a status symbol. So it's not really anything actively malicious, more just pursuing an alien course of life.
It's not necessarily going anywhere outside of its asteroid.
And visually, Connor, what do you think of the Exogorth?
When I was a kid, I thought it was one of the worms from Dune. Only in closer study to see that it looks more like a whale attached itself to a worm. Um, but as a kid, I was quite frightened, very startled whenever it would make an appearance.
Yeah. All hail Shai Hulud, may his passing cleanse the world. Um, yeah, this is instead Exogorth, may his presence
Like the horde.
there we go.
Mhm.
Uh Yeah, and so I mean, the aesthetic of giant devouring space worm with the teeth that are closing and appear to be a cave. It's also just I think part of the appeal of the giant space creature is how big they are. That's also one of the things. It activates the feeling of looking at something sublime and sort of in the original artistic sense of this is larger than a human, more powerful than any mortal, almost incomprehensible and Lovecraftian in its immensity.
And I am in trouble. Yeah. So then, would you want to venture towards the more malicious or the more benevolent
Let's go
creatures
to the
on our
more
scale?
malicious. We can end on our happier space whales. So
Sure.
let's talk about the most dangerous creature we have today, and that is the suma-verminoth.
So yeah, this is very much a Lovecraftian tentacled creature that's um it encounters Han Solo and his crew when doing the Kessel Run in one of the more memorable set pieces of a Star Wars movie in general, not just Solo itself, I would say.
Yeah, the suma-verminoth is even bigger than the exogorth. It's just almost incomprehensibly huge compared to the Millennium Falcon, existing in the dark space between stars in a nebula. So living in an even more hostile and alien environment. And ancillary materials such as the Darth Vader comic confirm that the Suma-Verminoth is the apex predator of giant space monsters. It's the giant space monster that eats other giant space monsters for food.
Yeah, I'd like to point out that uh, this goes with the Exegol as well, but there's no attempt at all to overcome the Suma Verminoth. It is only how do we escape this creature? How do we get out of the circumstance we put ourselves into?
Yeah, you're not using your blaster on the Suma-Verminoth. You're not, um, using proton torpedoes to kill the Suma-Verminoth.
Right.
The only thing that ends up, there are two things that end up that we see able to defeat a Suma-Verminoth. The gravity well of a star, which,
Mhm.
of course, can kill a creature, and then the dark side of the Force. There is a part of the Darth Vader comic when Darth Vader is heading to Exegol, and he's in conflict with Palpatine, and he mentally force dominates Suma Verminoth to use his like giant kaiju leverage against Palpatine.
Wow. That's a bit of a flex.
Yeah, but then Palpatine's in his fortress in Exegol and flexes back, and they have a big Sith dick measuring contest for a while.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's not the first time that we see Vader use um, Force dominate to dominate the mind of a giant space creature. But we'll get into that when we get to the Purgill.
So yeah,
So
very intimidating, very frightening, very much a uh, just that great way to show exactly what you were saying. We're small humans out in these ships in space, and we have something that is, the size of a moon chasing after you, makes for a heightened, frightened experience.
yeah, and this one is even like the Exogorth is big, but the Sumer Verminoth is it's like the fast zombie. It's like cheating.
Yeah.
Um, it's not only the size of a moon, but it's fast and it's hungry and it's chasing after you to devour you. And it's like you also literally run into this living creature when you're in a nebula in space. It's kind of the ultimate creepiness that happens. You don't, if you're expecting to like run into a supernova or an asteroid field, you're not expecting there to be a moving tentacle present inside the giant gas cloud in space. And that's what the Suma Verminoth represents.
Yeah, you're not expecting life, and certainly not on that scale. But yeah, that
Right.
brings us to our space whales. So, if I'm correct, you're quite fond of the space whale.
Oh, I'm a big proponent of space whales in all of their forms. The Purgill in Star Wars, I enjoy them quite a bit. They have been depicted. They're relatively recent to Star Wars canon. So the Exogorth is our original one, and then Suma Verminoth appeared in Solo for the first time. The Purgill first canonically showed up in the Rebels TV show.
Oh yeah, and then from there I think we only see them in live action in the Ahsoka show, unless they're in some ancillary written material.
Yep, that is the only live action depiction of the Purgill to date, has been in the Ahsoka show, and it is one of my favorite parts of the Ahsoka show. We also see a cyberized Purgill being used as literally the base for Cylon 4, one of the Emperor's mad scientists in the Imperial era, who has his spaceship built into the body of this living whale. Uh, Vader, who does not like Cylon 4 and eventually kills him, force dominates the whale into flying into a sun.
Ah,
Uh, when Cylon starts boasting about how, oh, his space whale ship is so much better, Vader's like, why did you have a ship with a consciousness that I can dominate? So,
so yeah, the motivating factor for putting your spaceship within this whale, we have a giant creature with utility. So where the Exgol and the suma-verminoth, they're large, imposing creatures. They don't have a lot of, I would say, purpose outside of being intimidating. Whereas the Purgill are kind of the forebearers of hyperspace travel. They're organic creatures that, much like in the world of Avatar: The Last Airbender, uh, intelligent life learned from these animals in order to replicate technology. So it makes them a very important and very interesting kind of creature in the Star Wars universe.
yeah, it's implied that Purgill are the first to ever utilize, or they can biologically use hyperspace. One of their primary items of their diet is to ban a gas, which they then provides the energy for them to jump into hyperspace in and out. And yeah, Purgill themselves are a vary in size from about the size of a ship to much, much larger. And they are largely benign, though they do cause casualties among hyperspace shipping lanes because, hey, they're giant space whales that can jump in the shipping lanes.
Mhm. And so, when it comes to kind of interactions between them and humans, what do we have? Um, what sort of interactions do they have with humanity?
So you can commune with Purgill in the Force, and it's implied that they are intelligent and ancient beings that have a strong connection to the Force themselves. We see Ezra Bridger able to connect with the Purgill en masse, and he uses them as a secret weapon in his fight against the Empire on Lothal to summon a pod of Purgill that then destroy and scatter the remnants of Grand Admiral Thrawn's fleet. We also see Ahsoka Tano as an adult Jedi, uh, able to commune with a Purgill, who then takes her to the planet of Peridia, a graveyard of the Purgill. Um, we also see potentially Grogu communing with a Purgill in the Mandalorian. Uh, I
Oh, I forgot
sorry,
about that. Yeah.
that is actually another live action depiction of the Purgill.
Mhm.
We see the silhouette of a Purgill in hyperspace alongside the Mandalorian's starfighter.
Yeah, really our first implication of their inclusion in the live action universe, and another, demonstration that they are connected to the Force. Reminds me very much of the Bendu, but just not as not when I say not as intelligent, I only mean that the Purgill do not speak. They do not communicate with people. I would say that they were probably very intelligent creatures, much like actual whales of the sea variety.
Yeah, and the Purgill are also quite visually distinct when they go into hyperspace. They have lines on their body that light up, and they are not just passive herbivoric creatures. They remind me a little bit of the whales from The Way of Water,
Mhm.
where they can make intelligent choices and can are used as a metaphor of nature conquering over industrialization. When the Purgill abduct the Chimera, Thrawn's flagship, and decimate the rest of his fleet that was left behind. And what do you think of the visuals of the scene in Ahsoka where Ahsoka Tano is communing with the largest of the Peridian Purgill, attempting to um, let her ship into its mouth and fly to this other galaxy?
Well, it gives sort of the notion of what you said before about being the sublime scene of having this uh, unbelievable sized living creature that is not only conscious of the human speaking to it, but is communicating with it. So being seen and comprehended by something that is immense in size is frightening, is intimidating. Um, it has that sublime energy that you're talking about, and it also shows that to a force user, size matters not. That there is still a connection between these beings.
Yeah, we know that all people are not fans of Purgle. Hera Syndulla is originally very down on the Purgle because she had lost a friend who crashed into a Purgle. But by the time of Ahsoka and before that, um, Hera has come around on the Purgle.
Mhm.
Though Grand Admiral Thrawn gives an order to kill any Purgle that come closer to his ship, all in an attempt to kill the Jedi. Ahsoka Tano is coming towards him,
Mhm.
which you have to admit Thrawn's approach of going scorched earth against all Jedi nearby does serve him well.
Yes, it's a good tactic for him. Just keep them away, keep them as far away as possible.
Strand them in another galaxy if you can.
Hmm.
Then they can might have difficulty coming back.
Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah,
So,
that is the Purgle. They fly between different planets and hyperspace routes. Their paths were studied by the ancient Dathomiri Night Sisters, who then rode the Purgle to travel between stars, which is badass as all hell. It's the Purgle migration patterns that are used as the map on how to get to Peridia in Ahsoka. So for those who are not sure who are like, how did they get a map? It's like that was a map of the Purgle migration routes,
mhm.
which would be of very interest to a people that rely on Purgle for hyperspace travel.
Right. So yeah, I was trying to think of other large creatures, and there's the Zillo beast, but they're not exactly a spacefaring race, though they are quite kaiju-like in their design.
No, I think I can't think of any other large creatures that exclusively live in space that have
Yeah.
appeared in Star Wars canon. I'm sure there are that we're missing. So for anyone who would like to tell us about a space kaiju that we're missing, just post on our Reddit at reddit.com/r/talking Star Wars.
Yeah, and Star Wars is always, inventing and creating, so who knows if we'll get to see the dark side equivalent of a Purgill. Imagine some Sith space eel or some creature threatening our heroes at some point. I'd be interested.
Yeah. So let's uh let's rank our creatures. So in order of deadliness, they're all deadly, but
Hmm.
I would say least deadly is the Purgle because at least they're herbivorous or non-carnivorous. While they can smash into ships and are certainly dangerous, they don't actively attack, and they are mostly travel along known lanes. Next most dangerous, what would you put, Connor?
Definitely the Exegol, just for the sake of who's
Exogorth.
Exogorth.
Exogol is an ancient Sith planet.
Potato, potato. So the Exegol I would place next because I would say that their interactions are intentionally uh, disastrous. They don't have the same sort of maliciousness that I would say that the suma-verminoth inherently have.
Yeah. So if you happen to wander by an Exogorth, it might devour you. The suma-verminoth is going to hunt you across parsecs of space in an attempt to eat you. So I would agree with Connor's take that we go least dangerous would be the Purgle, most dangerous would be the suma-verminoth, and hanging out in the middle is our space worm. Uh, Space Shahulud. May his clapping cleanse the space world.
For his collection. Yes. So yeah,
All right.
thank you again for taking the time to sit and discuss the Star Wars large creature phenomenon. We look forward to seeing what gets included later on.
Yeah, appreciate everyone listening to episode 80 about large space creatures. And if anyone has any cool stuff, let us know. And we can all admit that the scene of the suma-verminoth being ripped apart by a sun in Solo, while creepy, is also incredibly cool.
Oh, absolutely. So
All
yes,
right.
until next time, Star Wars fans.
This has been Talking Star Wars.
We'll see you sometime soon in a galaxy right here.